Words are like the sea. You must descend deep into the waters to see what lies in the bottom. For those content to gaze, there is only beauty and tedium. The truth lies here. How it is accepted is only that, the truth for each man. You may have seen this quote on my channel banner before. It is the single most impactful quote in anything I've ever experienced. To me, these are words to live by, and of the countless messages and ideas Vagabond explores, this is the one that speaks to me personally more than any of the others. The idea that we are all alone in this world together. I dislike viewing Vagabond from a very critical, analytical lens. In many ways, I think that actually works against the experience and robs the art of its value. That's probably funny to hear considering it's my absolute favourite work of fiction and is widely revered as one of the greatest manga ever put to page. I also just naturally engage with media from an analytical perspective. I like to discuss, dissect, and generally just think long and hard about stories. Interpretation is something I value deeply. That's the entire reason I made this channel. So trying not to view my favourite work of fiction from an analytical lens is an active effort. It's something I consciously try not to do while reading the story. I try to turn my brain off and let the story speak to me. Why? Because so many things in this world cannot be expressed with words. Some things cannot be explained. They must be felt, they must be experienced, and that especially applies to Vagabond for me. Discussion on this story is fairly rare. The majority of people seem to agree it's a terrific manga, and you'll see praise for its artistry all the time, but actual deep dives, nuanced breakdowns of the theming and character writing are few and far between. And while that is a shame, I can't say it's not understandable. And not for some corny reason like Vagabond is such a work of art, words can never capture its greatness. That's true if you ask me, obviously, it's the greatest thing I've ever read in my opinion, but the reason for this lack of analysis, I think, is because Vagabond demands the reader to imbue themselves onto the narrative. It integrates the audience as an active part of the experience. No two interpretations on this story will ever be exactly the same because no two people will ever be exactly the same. To talk about Vagabond is, in many ways, to talk about yourself. This isn't particularly novel, and I appreciate that you could say this for virtually every story out there because subjectivity is a thing, but Vagabond takes this idea to an extreme the likes of which I've rarely seen. Like I said, it demands the reader to project themselves onto the story, and maybe that's why I've only ever made a single video on my favourite fictional story. Talking about yourself, especially to strangers on the internet, is incredibly daunting, and so this video is going to be personal in a way I've never really attempted before. Please bear with me and feel free to leave your own thoughts on this topic in the comments below. I'm incredibly interested to hear what you all have to say. You may have seen memes about Vagabond's dialogue before. Sometimes it's better to come in the sink than to sink in the cum. That's a completely made up line slapped on a random panel of Takuan telling Musashi he has become strong, but even some genuine lines from the story are mocked for supposedly not really saying anything. Preoccupied with a single leaf, you won't see the tree. Preoccupied with a single tree, you'll miss the entire forest. That is perhaps the quintessential example. I've seen countless posts about this line simply being generic yapping. And what I think is especially ironic about this rhetoric is the fact that all of these grand, sweeping quotes within the story, these lessons in the form of words of advice, and specifically how Musashi engages with them, is endlessly criticized. What is Musashi's goal? The thing he's striving for throughout the majority of the story? to become invincible under the sun. What does Sekishusai tell him when Musashi seeks advice from him in complete adoration of the old man's power? Invincible, it's merely a word. Words are just words. It is one thing to just hear something and be able to repeat it, and it's another thing entirely to experience it for yourself, to resonate and wholly appreciate the weight of those words. Vagabond may be a very philosophical manga, but it is never morally instructive. It never takes a hard stance on anything. Even the act of killing, something that is typically universally vilified, something Musashi showcases intense guilt over in countless different ways, is not completely framed in a negative light. Of course, there are a number of characters who speak out against the killing, but there are others in highly regarded positions within the narrative who have different takes on the matter. A Vagabond is not trying to teach. In fact, I'd say it's trying to do the exact opposite. Study the life and character of Miyamoto Musashi. Study what it means to be strong. Study perplexing, abstract concepts like oneness, compatibilism, even happiness. Despite the allure of an early retirement following the massive success of Slam Dunk, Inoue chose to draw this story because he had become infatuated with Eiji Yoshikawa's novel, which Vagabond is a loose adaptation of. In this interview, which I'll leave a link to in the description, Inoue talks about how he stuck closely to the novel at the start of Vagabond's serialization and gradually distanced himself from it in pursuit of his own ideal. He then goes on to say that he's not really interested in telling a story from a traditional narrative perspective. What Inoue wants to draw is what Miyamoto Musashi the man was like. He sees his creation as more like poetry than a story. Poetry is a form of artistic expression that oversteps narrative boundaries. It is a medium where anything and everything goes. The point of poetry is not only to inspire thought and interpretation, but to serve as a gateway for the reader to find their own answers, to let the poem speak to them. In his author notes, we can see how Inoue personally reflects Musashi in their mutual efforts to strive towards a state of equanimity and mental clarity. Inoue wants to live in the now. That's probably the main reason why he opted to draw this manga primarily using a brush. He can get lost in the act of drawing. In the same way Musashi yearns for a state of complete awareness, to swing as if he has no arms so that the sword functions not like a tool but like an extra limb and natural extension of the body, Inoue yearns for that same effect with his paintbrush, to turn his brain off and let his body flow naturally, like a stream of water being guided by several external factors, from the wind to the rock formation to the temperature of the air. The water metaphor is more concerned with another aspect of Vagabond's theming, the coexistence of fate and free will, and while that does massively integrate into what I'm exploring today, it is something I find very challenging to try and write about. Maybe some other day I'll try my hand at discussing that in depth, but for today I want to focus specifically on that quote from the start of the video. Early in the story, Ine tells Musashi that you can only perceive what true strength is when you yourself become truly strong. They get drunk and Musashi mocks him, telling him anybody could come up with that line, which is just one of many examples of Inoue's self-awareness when it comes to the dialogue. Ine responds by saying the truth is obvious yet ever elusive. It is here where the first seeds are planted for this recurring idea that some things can only be truly understood with experience. This is primarily concerned with the abstract and conceptual, things that lack concrete material definition, things like being invincible under the sun, or fate and free will. Even very basic concepts like strength and weakness, love and hate. How does one draw the line between these things? What one person views as a strength could easily be what somebody else considers to be a weakness. Some may hate the things others love. By and large, most things in life are a blank canvas. It is we who paint meaning onto this canvas. It is we who impart meaning upon the things around us through not just the shared knowledge of our species spanning generations, but our individual values and perspectives. The way we view things is inseparable from who we are, and language is the perfect frame of reference for this idea. Language is a social construct. Words are man-made and they evolve over time. The same word can mean completely different things to different people when things like culture, location, age, and other variables are considered. Like most things in this world, language is subjective, and so words are a vehicle to communicate meaning and not the meaning itself. Words as a motif is particularly profound because speech serves as the ultimate bridge between an individual's internal world and the external reality. By putting things into words, you are materializing the intangible. You are verbalizing something unobservable to everybody but yourself, giving form and structure to what lies within your mind. But even then, words are just words. In the 306th chapter of the manga, we get 30 pages of this idea being explored. Musashi yearns to be infinite once more, to reach that level of oneness with his surroundings that he had reached as a child. This is what Musashi now views as being invincible under the sun. The thing he's been chasing after the entire story is something he once had as a young boy. This state of infinity and spiritual enlightenment is a very difficult thing to explain, and honestly, it's not that important for today's discussion, so I've left a link to this fantastic video that does a brilliant job diving into the spiritual concepts of Zen that might be confusing to you as it is for me. Thing is, you don't really need to understand any of this. In fact, you can't fully understand spiritual enlightenment. That's what chapter 306 is wholly dedicated to exploring. In trying to feel like he did as a child once more, Musashi is swinging his sword in the woods. He is talking out of his arse for several pages, trying to lose himself in the art of swordsmanship, trying to reach a flow state where his brain shuts off and his body moves on pure instinct. The guy is shouting "Thump, ta, fush, ta whoosh." He looks like somebody who has completely lost the plot, but all of it comes together so powerfully in this single line. Musashi states, and I quote, "I get lost in the maze of words that I came up with." Words like invincible under the sun, words like infinite. By trying to put these things into words, he cages himself. And this entire chapter serves as a critique of how Musashi has engaged with those words over the course of the story. Instead of trying to interpret, trying to rationalize and understand, he should be trying to feel. Meaning exists not in words, but in emotion. Vagabond is centered around its main character more so than perhaps any other manga I've read. Every character, every concept, every page and every panel ultimately contributes to Musashi in some way, shape or form. Throughout his journey, he comes across various old men. Takwan, Inoue, Sekishusai, Kotetsu, Shusaku. All of these men share their wisdom, their experiences, their philosophies with the young man who strives to become invincible, and they do so in the only way they can, with words of advice. Many of the quotes that come from these old men are constantly recurring. They leave a mark on Musashi's mind and he thinks back to them time and time again, trying to grasp the true meaning of these words. In the final chapter of the very first arc, Musashi has one of the most important conversations of his life. He is granted the opportunity to be reborn, to fake his death and escape from his crippling reputation as a demon child, to seek a life away from the violence and the needless killing. Takwan lays it out bare. He tells him in plain, simple words, this life is not for you. And yet, in the following arc, hell, the following chapter, Musashi makes the decision that would force him into a life of violence and needless killing. Of course, 4 years have passed, and Musashi's behavior is not exactly the same as it was in the first arc. Instead of being ruthless and trying to kill every big name he can, he pursues a more sophisticated path to becoming invincible, challenging samurai who live and breathe the way of the sword in organized duels. This isn't killing in cold blood anymore. All parties are consenting and it's more like killing for sport, but it is killing all the same. 220 chapters after his decision to step into that dojo and challenge Yoshioka Seijiro, and Musashi lays in a bloodbath of 70 members of that clan. Takwan's words from the start of the story show up again, only this time they've truly sunk in. Musashi has finally grasped the weight of those words, the weight of his own actions, and expresses a desire to escape the spiral of killing. It took 220 chapters, several near-death experiences, several lives taken, and even more lives ruined because Musashi killed their loved ones for him to finally understand what Takwan was trying to say all the way back then. This isn't even close to the only example either. Sekishusai telling him invincible is only a word is something he doesn't truly grasp until chapter 287, 185 chapters later. Why? Because words are just words. Some things are meant to be experienced. Some things need to be experienced for you to truly comprehend them. I am the youngest in a family of 5 boys, and the brother that's closest to me in age is over 7 years older than me. So growing up with a lot of older brothers who had a very similar upbringing to me in the same city, I had several role models to learn from and take advice from. They would tell me what to do, what not to do, they would share their own experiences, and that was obviously a big help in my adolescent years. It's something I'm very grateful for, something I know a lot of people are not fortunate enough to have. But a lot of what they tried to teach me fell on deaf ears. So much of what they told me to do, I never did. So much of what they told me not to do, I went and did. Even though I had a perfect blueprint in front of me, a guideline for how to live my life, a checklist of mistakes not to make, things were not that simple. I didn't follow the guidelines. I made a lot of those mistakes, even though I subconsciously knew they were mistakes. And looking back, there are definitely regrets. I'm not going to tell you I wouldn't change a single thing about my past, because I would, and there are countless things I would change. But I find solace in the fact that I am who I am today because of those mistakes, because of those regrets. I find value in words that previously felt like annoying nagging because I've grown and have newfound perspectives. Some things just need to be experienced. You need to make those mistakes. A f***ing book on self-help isn't going to magically give you the key to becoming a better person. An inspirational quote isn't going to magically give you the strength to change your life. Because words are like the sea. You'll never know what lies within those waters unless you dive straight in. So dive in. The truth lies within, and how that truth is accepted is only that, the truth for each man, your truth, your individual perspective, your own conclusions. What is strength? I don't know, you tell me. Musashi thinks being soft and warm, being kind, is what it means to be strong. But he also believes those are mere words, words that can only be comprehended when you yourself become strong. In the last exhibition, we witnessed the final moments of Musashi, the end of his life on Earth and his subsequent ascension to Nirvana, a transcendent state in which it is believed there is neither suffering, desire, nor sense of self. The final goal within the teachings of Buddhism, believed to be the most elevated position a soul can hope to reach. In this chapter, we see firsthand the impact of Musashi's written work and how truly inspirational he was. This is Inoue's fictionalized take on a real person who lived, so this entire story kind of breaks the fourth wall, given that the author himself is somebody heavily inspired by the real Musashi's written work. People from all over the country come to visit him in Reigando Cave, the place the real Musashi spent his last 2 years alive. The same cave he would retreat to as a child and converse with the skeleton of a dead samurai. They come to learn from Musashi, to pay their respects. He may have been responsible for ending the lives of many, but for many more people in the past, in the future, and for eternity, Musashi had shown the way. This entire scene feels like a way for Inoue to pay his respects to the real Musashi and the legacy he left behind in the form of his books. And in another sense, Vagabond and this exhibition is the exact same thing. Written work that has shown the way for many people. And as a story that is doused with expressionism, that utilizes several visual metaphors and never takes a hard stance one way or the other, Vagabond is what you make of it. So this page, the truth lies here, how it is accepted is only that, the truth for each man. That is Inoue telling you that whatever you took away from this manga, that is your own valid takeaway and nobody can take that from you. And in an even broader sense, this poses the argument that there is no one universal truth that every individual on this planet will ever come together to agree upon. I mean, it's 2024 and some people still think the earth is flat. How we accept things is only that. How we accept things, our own truths, and that is what matters most. I know it probably comes across like I just discovered the concept of subjectivity and I'm losing my mind over the most basic thing ever, but it is so much more than just that. It is embracing subjectivity as the foundation for kindness and human connection. Like I said at the start of the video, we are all alone in this together. We as people are the personification of our life's experiences, hence the term individual. Single and separate from the rest of humanity, yet still living amongst each other within our societies as humans who are fundamentally wired the same way. So we are alone in one sense and together in another sense, both parts being essential halves of the same whole, with that understanding being the foundation to any kind of human connection. To understand somebody else, you must first understand that you can never fully walk in their shoes, and they can never fully walk in yours. All of this directly speaks to the idea of compatibilism that encompasses Vagabond's many philosophies. I said I wasn't going to talk about compatibilism and the water metaphor because it's too challenging for me at this moment in time, but there's one thing I'll say. This belief that everything being preordained or determined is exactly what makes one free is not presented as a definitive solution. It isn't presented as a logical answer to the age-old philosophical conflict of fate and free will, and neither is it providing an argument for the meaning of human existence. This belief is presented as a way of life, as a way to conquer the human condition. Fears, regrets, doubts, the poison of man. Compatibilism in Vagabond is not an answer, it is a gateway to finding your own answer. It functions as a foundation to countless supporting ideas that further that core principle, the affirmation of one's life experiences and complete acceptance of your inherent individuality, to embrace yourself and all the little quirks and idiosyncrasies that make you, you, and to understand that every other person has their own inherent individuality that was triggered by a chain of experiences that make them who they are. Whether they had any choice in the matter is besides the point. A baby doesn't choose its parents. People don't choose to go through traumatic experiences, and yet it is undeniable that these things have a massive role in making somebody who they are. Human life cannot be calculated. It flows according to the whims of the world and the people within it. Ultimately, how life goes is beyond our control, and to accept that fact is the only way you can take control of the things that are directly affectable. Everything I've discussed applies to art as well. Swordsmanship is an art form that Musashi strives to wholly experience, to get lost in and feel beyond words. Drawing Vagabond is the same experience for Inoue, and reading Vagabond is the same experience for me. That's why I dislike viewing this story from an overly analytical lens, because it forces me to interpret and rationalize things that I believe are best appreciated in that irrational state. It forces me to give form to the otherwise formless. And it's also just such a work of art that words can never capture its greatness. Thank you guys very much for watching, and please let me know if this resonated with you.